Welcome to the Emisarios Unidos de Luz channel. If you enjoy this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now let's start with the story. My NDE occurred soon after I lost consciousness from the anesthetic administered at the beginning of my stomach operation. In an experience even more vivid to me than my corporeal life, I remember opening my eyes to see a circular courtyard surrounded by beautiful flowers and perfectly trimmed hedges, warmed by sunlight streaming down from a sky speckled with evenly spaced, fluffy white clouds. As I scanned the scenery, I noticed red cobblestone paths weaving through and interconnecting multiple courtyards, forming an intricate mesh of paved gardens that ramified across the landscape as far as the eye could see. Gazing into the distance, I marveled at the beautiful rolling hills that stretched across the entire countryside, delighting in their charm. The flowers that covered the fields and which bordered the network of brooks exuded the most wonderfully intoxicating perfumes. In that sublimely wonderful province, I was awestruck by the vivid colors and by the breathtaking grace and elegance that imbued everything. In that domain where everything brimmed with life, I was filled with love and a peace profoundly deeper than any I had experienced during my earthly existence, and I knew that state of sublime tranquility was due to God's all-pervasive presence. Even against my perception of the physicality that seemed to characterize the things of that world, I knew intuitively that I was truly in a realm of spirit, a non-physical realm, a place that, however, I felt was my true home. Am I in heaven? I wondered. Yet, my question was of little consequence, for the place I found myself in far exceeded my expectations of the happiness, peace, and love I had imagined heaven would offer. Suddenly, 3 men appeared before me, men whose visages were familiar and who seemed astonished to find me there among them. Those men, smiling broadly, began walking quickly towards me, and as they neared, I recognized one of them as an old friend, Jason, a guy who, as a young man, had died in a car accident. In that heavenly realm, Jason and I communicated through the exchange of love energy. Through the communication of heavenly love, Jason communicated his delight to see me, and in reciprocating that love, he understood that I felt the same. Among the 3, I also recognized an old friend I had long since lost touch with, Glenn. Through the genuine love he radiated, Glenn communicated his joy at seeing me, and in receiving that heavenly love, I responded to his warmth in kind. It was then that the third of the 3 approached, a man I recognized as one of my primary school teachers, and of whom I used to address as Mr. Summers. In the 5th grade, Mr. Summers was my favorite teacher, and seeing him in front of me in heaven was a most pleasing turn of events. As I communicated my pleasure at seeing him once again through the warmth of loving sentiment, he reciprocated in kind. He then communicated to me that he would be my guide during my sojourn in heaven. We then began to stroll down one of the smaller garden paths, and as we walked across one of the bridges that spanned a brook, he conveyed to me that even though I had been experiencing some challenges at that moment in my life, he was pleased to observe the progress I was making. I didn't dare respond with the many questions that came to mind, however, because I knew intuitively that my time there was for listening, observing, and learning. He then began to deliver a message that I was to pass on to others, a message that was given to him by God himself. He explained that the body that I was seeing was an illusion created for my comfort, as bodies weren't needed in the realm of spirit. Mr. Summers explained to me that the veil between the realm of the spirit and the physical world was thin, and that those who have passed on, and who now reside in the realm of the spirit, can see us very easily. Because they never really leave us, one shouldn't allow themselves to become consumed by grief because they will be reunited with their loved one in the afterlife if they so desire. Mr. Summers then began to tell me about future events. He explained to me that COVID is just the beginning of a series of calamities that will befall mankind, crises that will occur as a direct result of the damage that he has inflicted upon the planet. Confusion and suffering on a mass scale will ensue as a result of these cataclysms, precipitating conflicts that will spread across borders. The forces of darkness, watching as evil consumes the minds of men and chaos unfolds upon the earth, will seize their opportunity to claim the earth itself, for they are no longer content to be confined to their realm of darkness, he explained. I was then shown a 4th-dimensional holographic map of our world, with varying areas of light and darkness, as Mr. Summers described the monumental battle Satan and his legions are preparing for. He emphasized that this is not a time for Christians to stock up on guns and ammunition, but rather to combat the darkness by extending love and compassion to their fellow man. While there may be times when one must defend themselves with force, it should only be a last resort after all other avenues have been exhausted. Regardless of the circumstances, one should never succumb to savagery but strive to resolve conflicts with love and understanding to receive God's blessings. He also explained to me that during this time, it would be wise to stockpile food and medicine, and investing in a generator would be prudent. There will come a time when all commerce will break down as society spirals into lawlessness. God wants Christians to be regarded as great helpers, especially to those who feel lost, he said. I was told that I was to share this message. He then reached out, took my hand, and told me that while I was so close, I was, in a sense, still very far from fulfilling my purpose of being a light in a time of darkness. Your words are no less significant just because you feel comfortable sharing them with an audience of 1 or 2, people whom others wouldn't usually reach out to, he said. Don't worry about college degrees and titles. What really matters is what comes from the heart, he said. Once the desire of your heart aligns with God's, you shall have everything you have ever wanted, he said. Taking the first step by getting involved will trigger a series of events that will ultimately lead you to your purpose, he foretold. God has spoken, he said as he let go of my hand. Although the tone of the message seemed somber, in that place of divine love, I wasn't the least bit worried about the events it foretold. I was so filled with God's love and peace that I didn't want to return to the worries and fears I was susceptible to on earth, nor did I want to feel distant from God's presence. Can I stay here with you in heaven? I asked. However, I was told that if I stayed, I wouldn't be able to complete what I had set out to accomplish on earth, and my friends wouldn't be able to fulfill their own tasks if I didn't return. Mr. Summers told me he loved me before directing me towards a gap in the trimmed hedge. The next thing I remember was feeling utterly drugged as I was being wheeled on a hospital bed towards the recovery room. The nurse informed me that the operation to remove my lap band was successful, but there had been complications, and it had taken much longer than expected. I wanted to ask her where the people had gone, but I knew she wouldn't understand whom I meant. My NDE experience occurred in 2020, and it was so extraordinary that I still haven't completely grasped all that transpired. I cannot tell you whether what I experienced was a vision, but I know in my heart it wasn't merely a dream. Returning to the physical world after experiencing the boundless love, joy, and happiness of my sojourn in heaven was deeply disheartening. However, I now realize, especially considering current world events, that it is in my best interest to apply the lessons of that message to my life in every way they are relevant. Several months after my NDE, God revealed the reason I was given that experience. He used the analogy of a student being called to the principal's office as a last resort, explaining that I had ignored the subtler mediums and messengers he had been using to communicate with me.